ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast. I'm Lori Adams Brown, and this is a podcast for those who are different and want to make a difference. Hey friends, buckle up because today's conversation is the wake-up call you did not know that you needed. I'm dead serious because we're diving in very deep with a woman who's nothing short of an absolute powerhouse. Samina Bari has spent over 3 decades smashing glass ceilings in the biopharmaceutical world. And we're talking about someone who's played a major role in $40 billion worth of high-stakes deals. Yes, that kind of powerhouse. But Samina's story isn't just about boardrooms and bottom lines. It's about courage, resilience, and the power of staying absolutely true to yourself when everything and everyone around you tells you to shrink. As a first-generation American and a woman of color in a male-dominated industry and in a male-dominated culture, she faced the kind of pressure that would crush most people. But instead, she rose. And then she turned around and made space for other women to rise with her. She mentors, she invests in women-owned businesses, she writes with radical honesty and the most beautiful vulnerability, and she leads with love, not ego, not fear, love. Today, Samina's pulling back the curtain on what it really takes to redefine success, own your story and your choices, and make a difference that actually lasts. So if you've ever felt underestimated, out of place, or just sick of playing small, this episode is for you. I am so excited. Let's get into it. Hey friend, let's talk. If you've been feeling stuck, uninspired, or just plain over it in your career, this is your wake-up call. It's time to stop waiting for that right moment and start making moves because no one is coming to rescue you. If you want to check out the Mastering the Career Pivot, my brand new masterclass is designed to help you take control of your career, pivot with confidence, and land a job you actually love. This isn't some fluffy follow your dreams nonsense. This is real strategy to get unstuck and take action now, right now. Here's what you get. 1 hour of video training with me, breaking down the exact steps you need to take. 1 hour or maybe 2 hours, depending on your process, of self-paced exercises to map out your career pivot plan. A free career pivot guide to walk you through the process. A clear, actionable roadmap so you can stop second guessing and start making moves. And if you want to go even deeper, you can grab the Pivot Package, a powerful set of tools, including a detailed workbook and 3 must-have spreadsheets to track your job search, networking, and applications like a pro. And let me just say, if you're going out there expecting to just apply for a job, the first job, and get it, maybe you're one of those people and maybe you do. But if you're like most of the rest of us, you get a job based on people you know. And statistically speaking, that's true, as well as in my own lived experience and career journey. So networking is really a huge part of it, but a lot of us don't know how. And so a spreadsheet where you can track that, break it down, figure out what to talk about. I have some sample interview questions, or you can do informational interviews. There's so much there in the Pivot Package that is part of my own journey that helped me when I did a career pivot several years ago. So here's the deal. This course will save you hours of frustration, second guessing, and aimless scrolling on job boards. Not helpful. You don't have time to waste, and your future is waiting. So let's get after it. Go to loriadamsbrown.com/career pivot and sign up for Mastering the Career Pivot today, because your next chapter, it's not going to write itself. Hello, everyone. We have a very special guest today. I'm very excited to welcome my friend and fellow board member of How Women Lead, Samina, to the show. It's very exciting to have you here today and for us to be doing this interview together. I want to start off with something I like to ask our guests from the beginning.
for our audience to get to know who you are just a tad before we get into the things we want to talk about today and the difference you're making. And the first question I have for you right out the gate is, tell us a little bit about the cultures and the places that formed you, Samina, that we see before us today.
Well, first of all, thank you, Lori, for having me. I'm delighted to be here with you. So I am a first-generation American born to Indian and Pakistani Muslim parents. I was born in New York, and my entire childhood could be summed up with one word, and it's a struggle. It was the struggle of feeling the need to conform based on my parents' expectations and standards, and my personal desire to really be one with everyone else and not seeing myself as different. So, my background with culture, particularly my parents' culture, is troubled and not one that I wholly supported, because I saw from a very young age the strictness and the patriarchal nature of the Islamic culture as it relates to the role women play within that society. And I think I knew at a very early age it wasn't for me. And it was reinforced as a teenager when I was on a trip with my parents to Saudi Arabia. And that, of course, is one of the most strict Islamic areas of the world. And I was subjugated to the behaviors and customs as one should as a visitor visiting a foreign country. You show respect, but I wasn't given that respect back when I was a child. I was groped by a man in public. And then I was accused of being the one who instigated it. And I think you can tell, and your listeners can tell, that a child of 15 in a foreign country who was essentially assaulted by a grown man, not responsible for that, nor should I have been asked to apologize for that behavior. So that's really one of the most formative experiences that really solidified my disconnect with the Islamic culture and religion. And so as a result, I grew up really distancing myself from it, because in my heart of hearts, I just don't believe that women should be treated that way. And that's why today I advocate for women. I want women to be free and live their true potential.
I'm just so heartbroken that you experienced that in the land that was supposed to be, well, literally the Mecca. We say the word Mecca for other things, right?
Yes.
Of the religion and the faith and the values that you were raised with, and what should have been a very deeply spiritual experience turned into something traumatic, where you got blamed for something that was not your fault, and you were a child. And even if you hadn't been a child, no woman is walking around that I've seen working under Islamic law myself. I worked under Sharia law in Indonesia in a particular province for a while, and also wore hijab and all the things, and also got groped in the market. But I was an adult, and I was also blamed. And I understand how some very fundamentalist religions especially will blame women for those types of things. And it is not your fault. And I 100% believe you. And I'm horrified and infuriated that not only did that happen to you in a place that should have been safe and special, but that you were also blamed. And what I see and what I hear a little bit in that story is that you've grown into this woman that you wish probably you could have had around you at that point in your life. And they often say we do that on occasion, is that we become that person that 15-year-old girl would have wanted to be able to speak with. And so as you have grown into this amazing leader, author, total badass that you are, I'd love for you to take us a little further down the journey. Your journey really touches on a lot of powerful themes: mentorship, resilience, redefining success. I'd love for you to give us maybe one lesson from your life that you hope really every reader can take away from your book that you're releasing. I can, I will, and I did.
Yes, thank you. I think growing up with the background that I did, and recognizing from an early age, a very, very early age, the unfairness of that treatment, I rebelled against it. And everything I did was based on kind of a disbelief that women were being treated this way, and a steadfastness that I would not be treated that way. And so, the lesson that I have taken in life is people can try to put you in a box, but if you know who you are and you dream bigger and you want more for yourself, you just have to push your own agenda. Because ultimately you live the life that you're destined to live. And while you may disappoint people in the short term, they will get over it. Yeah. But if you don't live a life that is authentic to you, you will live with a lifetime of regrets. Mm-hmm. So be the person you know you can be, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And that's really the mantra I've lived with my entire life. It's not always the popular decision, and it's certainly not easy. It's a very scary, sometimes terrifying thing to go against your parents, your culture, your society, but you have to live your life. You will be the one who will have many tomorrows ahead of you. And you want to look back at your life at a certain point, like now, and know that you have as few regrets as possible.
So true. I resonate with that so much. I have a lot of regrets. And, the regrets I'm unpacking at this stage in my life, just celebrated a birthday. And one thing I learned in Indonesia from my Indonesian friends was on my birthday to be reflective and introspective. So I went on a birthday trip to Aruba, which is a place as close as I can get to where I grew up, which is Venezuela, which I can't go to right now because of the situation there. But the beaches look the same, and I heard the same music, got my favorite snacks in the grocery stores. And it just allowed me to go back to my childhood and think back. And I remember, on this birthday trip recently thinking, I was this good girl. I did the things they told me to do in my religion. I got the good grades. I did everything right. But somewhere along the way, my regrets aren't that I was this very rebellious, going out and drinking and partying and making a bunch of those kinds of mistakes. But I do have regrets that I allowed systems to make me small or silent or not, or feel like I was too much. And so I hear a little bit of what you're saying in that as an encouragement to people listening, to be yourself, to be your authentic self. It's never too late to start that. But many young women feel torn between family expectations and the dreams that they have, their desires. So I'd love to hear any advice you might share with someone trying to define her own future right now, especially when it means going against the grain.
Yeah. Excuse me. And that's certainly that was my lot in life. I was always the black sheep. I was the son my dad never had. And I was the daughter my mother really didn't want because I was not obedient and I did not comply and I did not, in Islam means to submit. I did not submit. I gave them grief every step of the way. And so I'm sure I was really a difficult child to parent for parents who didn't know what was in store for me and what lay ahead. But times were different then. Today, the world is so connected. Today, young women, young men have so many role models to look toward. They have social media. They are connected across the globe. I didn't have that when I grew up. So for me, it was a very slow, lonely slog. And it seemed like me against the world because I had no role models who looked like me. And I had no one certainly encouraging me. But you have to know in your heart what you want for yourself, and that it is not just about defying your parents. It's not simply an act of rebellion. It's an act of truth. It's understanding who you want to be. What is your dream for yourself when you grow older? Can you even envision that? And then being very intentional and taking steps towards making that dream a reality, and knowing along the way you will disappoint people. But life is not without disappointment. We are all disappointed. We are disappointed by life. We are disappointed by people. We are disappointed by decisions. But there has to be a greater cause. And the greater cause is growing into yourself and becoming the best version of you can be. Just because your parents or society doesn't see it that way doesn't mean it's not there. And again, I would encourage to fight that good fight. Don't let anyone make you small. There are certain things you should follow and certain things you've got to trust your gut with that are not the right decisions for you. And I would just say follow your instinct because that's always what's led me to the right places in life.
So good. I'm so glad that you had that you could trust yourself and that you instinctively did that and you're increasingly doing that. I think that is one of the life lessons I learned way too late, but it's not too late for people listening. Yeah. And I hope that you're hearing that wherever you're listening around the world. And I'm thinking about, maybe there's that Muslim girl, maybe she's in Indonesia right now or in Pakistan or in Saudi Arabia. I don't know if they can get this podcast there, but maybe traveling somewhere else. And she's feeling the weight of her religion, of her parents, not being the daughter her mom expected her to be, maybe not keeping all her hair stuffed into the hijab well enough, or, all the microaggressions that women get in that world where women are often the ones making sure women and girls stay in line. And where patriarchy can outsource that even in the patriarchal bargain to the women who are the upholders of the religion, of the fundamentalism, whatever religion that is, And so I'm thinking about that girl and how your story must be so inspiring to know that, like you said, you didn't have people, but people in this day and age can have people through social media and through podcasts. As you think about that girl, is there something that you would like to say to her right now?
Yeah, I would love to just encourage young girls and women just to be as true to yourself as possible. And I do want to be very clear. My experiences were my experiences alone, and I am not in any way wholesale condemning a religion or a culture, not at all. But if there is a feeling of discontent or slight rebellion, that's not a bad thing. That's your fire. That's your spirit. That's what you were born with. And don't let anyone take that fire away from you. Because again, as I would say to my parents when we would have our big fights about why I was not following their path, I would say, well, I'm the one who has to live the rest of my life. I'm the one who has to grow old with myself. I'm the one who will have a family and children and have to pass down my ideals. And I would like them to be my ideals. And I think that was always what kept me going. And I took whatever frustrations I felt and I used them as fuel. I used the anger of the unrighteousness toward me to be my fuel. And I would encourage others to do that too, because you have two choices when you're being asked to be smaller. You can either submit, become less of a person, stifle your dreams, and deal with a life of perhaps mental health issues, depression, or even a life unfulfilled. Or you can use that energy to map out and will the life you want to live. Because again, if you're younger and you're listening to this, you have so many tomorrows ahead of you, and you want to make them count, and you really want to make sure that your life is full of abundance and joy, and you can look back when you're old and say, wow, I really had a good life. That's really what life is about, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It's that Mary Oliver poem, I think it is, that people quote, this one wild and magnificent life or wonderful life or something like that. That line that a lot of us find really inspiring to think of, to motivate us every day about the values that we hold and the ones, maybe that we got from our upbringing. My assumption is there are parts of your upbringing you have kept and the parts that you have gotten rid of. So maybe some of those values are still there and some of them you realize they weren't your values. And that's a lot of the story for a lot of us. We make those choices as we get to be adults and learn on our own and keep growing throughout the decades, right? So you emphasize being fueled by love instead of anger. And I hear that a lot in your story, especially in a world where women in business often have to fight to be heard. And how has the mindset that you've embraced influenced the way you lead and support other women in your industry?
Yeah, again, because so much of my early years were struggle and they were about defying the expectations of me. I used my frustration as fuel. But at some point, you've gotten to that point in your life where you're satisfied, and I'd accomplished everything I had wanted professionally and personally, and ultimately gained my parents' acceptance. And so it was time for that shift, that very gentle and organic shift from anger and that being my fuel towards more, who do I want to be? I am now the person I willed myself and dreamed myself to be. And how can I soften those edges? And how can I now give back? Because I've seen it can be done, and I've seen what can be done when I did it myself. But of course, between my childhood and my early adulthood, the world had shifted, closer to the world that we're living in today. And so, the love that I, have been able to harness from my trials and tribulations has been enormous. It's been my own self-worth. It's been understanding my role in the world and society. It's by having two amazing children. It's by marrying the man of my dreams, who, by the way, was outside of my parents' religion and culture, so I defied them with even that. And it's also knowing that I don't want young women to suffer needlessly or alone as I did. And so if I can help make anyone's path easier through encouragement or inspiration or even mentoring, I'm happy to do that, because no one should walk this world alone. We're not meant to do that. And I have an amazing chosen family that I have cultivated over the years, and they are my backbone and my support. And we all need cheerleaders on our side, even though we have to be our own number one cheerleaders. But it's kind of the life we create and the people we have in our life to help bolster bolster.
So true. Yeah, we need community. We need support. We're not made to do this alone. I do think that's one of the most beautiful parts about the board we sit on together, How Women Lead. But it actually reminds me, I read this research the other day, and you may have seen it. I can't remember which ape it is that's close genetically with their DNA to humans. Of all the ape species, it's the one that's closest, I guess, genetically to us. It's in like the Congo or somewhere where they've been observing these apes, and occasionally there'll be this male ape that starts shaking a tree and causing chaos and disrupting the entire community of apes. And it's basically the female apes will just kind of mob him all together and overpower him until he stops. And they deal with that. They're like, I don't know, the female police or something. But they know that the power of all of them together can stop this toxic masculinity situation from happening. And so I do think that is one of the powerful things about coming together with each other. Yes, every human has power, and that looks different depending on the situation you're in. We at least have the power to speak our own voice, even as babies when we're newborns, but there's levels of power, and we can either power over, power with. But I love the power with community that we have at How Women Lead. And I also love that it gives us representation with each other. Representation is something you mentioned earlier. I'd love to know what it meant for you to see or not see women in leadership when you were starting out.
Yeah, thank you. That is actually what I love about our group, How Women Lead, too, because it's really a group of women who are amazing individually, but, phenomenal together. And we are not threatened by one another. We genuinely want to help one another and give back, and we care. We are the opposite of mean girls, and that's something that every woman or young girl needs. You need your own tribe, and it's like our tribe. And of course, I didn't have strong female role models when I was a young professional. In fact, I had the very opposite. I currently live in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is an entirely different culture and ecosystem from New York City, which is really where all of my younger professional years were spent. And perhaps it was the industry I was in, but I had some really bad female bosses. In fact, talk about that queen bee syndrome. There was such a mindset of scarcity that I cannot let someone else be better than me, or I will not let someone else be better than me. I had a lot of very, very traumatic and memorable encounters with the few female bosses that I had. And what's interesting is I had some amazing male bosses too. So I'm always really, I don't know if I so much buy into the toxic masculinity, because, there are some men who are amazing allies, and I would encourage all the young women and professional women to find them, because they are the ones likely who have daughters and who really are very much more sensitized to how difficult it is to be a woman in the professional workplace. But yeah, I didn't have any good role models. And so just like growing up, I became the person I would want for myself. And so I hope I've been able to shape some careers for some young women in a way that I didn't get to experience myself.
Yeah, I'm sure that you have. I think when you've worked as long as the two of us have, you've had all of it, it feels like, right? I relate to your story because I've had really horrible male bosses, really amazing ones that sponsored and opened doors for me. And then the same is true of women. I just think that people are people, and some people see scarcity and some people see abundance, and that's the difference. Some people are givers, some people are takers, and it's not based on gender, but there is quite a bit of things going on geopolitically, I guess, where that toxic masculinity, especially in social media, we see it a lot in podcasting, where there are, the few bad apples out there that get a lot of press, and that's unfortunate because not everybody's that way, but the ones that are that way do make it very difficult for so many of us, and that's all the more reason organizations like How Women Lead are so beautiful, because we're sort of living out the change we want to see and that we want to be. And I see that in you too. In your book, you talk about, how your cultural background shaped your perspective, and you've sort of navigated through this and to this point into your life, and you've navigated this intersection of identity and tradition and professional ambition. And I just wonder how you would sort of describe that whole conglomeration of who you are today. What values have you kept from your upbringing, and what have you decided they weren't for you? And how would you describe your identity right now and who you are as a person?
Well, I've lived a long life, so it's obviously changed over the years. I think the values I was given I was, kind of raised with, were very cultural and religious based. So they were really about kind of prioritizing what the role of the woman was. And I didn't keep any of that, quite honestly. But I did. My father was an excellent role model in that he came to the United States with one suitcase and he endured his racism and he wanted a better life. And so out of the two parents, my father really was more of the believer in my potential. He was a quiet man, but his example he set about persisting, persevering his goals and also giving back to his community really, really stuck with me. So, I think that type of nature, the nurturing element that he gave me, I think is still very much part of my identity. The fight, I think the fight was just my reaction to the circumstance that I was in. But that has become an ingrained behavior for me. I will always encourage people to do what they feel is best, to trust their gut, to follow their dreams, even if it's a difficult choice, to work through that fear and recognize that they are who they are and their spirit is not meant to be squashed. And they should just go ahead and pursue what makes them happy, what makes them complete, what makes them who they are, without worrying about fear of what others think, because people will always think something and you cannot change that. And it is not anyone's role to change what someone feels. And just like when we were talking about the bosses, and the previous female bosses, even though I had horrible experiences with them, what I realized in those moments of getting yelled at and being called names was it wasn't about me, it was about them. So witnessing all of these things that I have throughout life is you cannot change how other people feel or what they believe. And that's not your job. You can only be the best person you can be. And you can only be the best person you're meant to be if you're true to yourself. Because if you're not, you won't be happy with yourself. And that does have a spillover effect into all aspects of life. I used to, say, that you can't look for other people to make you happy. And that's so true. Nothing external will make you happy. You have to be happy with yourself. You're going to be a good professional and a happy professional if you're a good person and a happy person, because you can't separate the two. So I just encourage everyone to follow their heart, their mind, trust their instinct, and not worry about what others feel or think.
It's great advice. I think a lot of us probably at work think, could everybody just get a therapist?
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think that yelling situation really had nothing to do with me, just like you said. But
Exactly.
What I hear in your story is like the values you took from your dad. Coming here as an immigrant, there are just very standard immigrant values that we see when there is something different in the kind of person that would pack a suitcase and come from South Asia all the way to the United States or from Central and South America and walk through the Darien Gap to get here. Yes. There's a certain amount of grit and determination, and I hear that value in you that's really given you the foundation to build resilience and to cultivate that in your own life and to stay grounded. So I hear in your story a lot of things that life threw your way that weren't your choice and were curveballs. But I'd love to know, how do you handle setbacks or failures, and what practices help you stay grounded and hopeful when it gets really tough?
Yeah. Well, and certainly I detail a lot of the challenges in my life in my book. I will, and I did. And some of the challenges in life are the ones we put at ourselves, throw ourselves. We want to pivot, or we want to do something very scary, or we have things happen to us. I think what keeps me moving forward is the fact that everything is a choice. Just like I had a choice all those years ago, I could either make myself smaller and follow what my mom wanted for me in life, or I could choose to take the more difficult path and choose to fight back. And so when we're faced with these moments in life, we always have a choice. It is, do we let ourselves wallow in it, or do we somehow try to pick ourselves up and find a way forward? I faced the deaths of a lot of loved ones in my life. I had the privilege, the very sad privilege of being able to be there for the last breaths of both my parents and of one of my oldest and dearest friends of 50 years. And it's how we move forward. And when my friend passed away, she had always encouraged me to write a book about my life story, because she always thought that there were so many lessons there and so many things that people could take away, that after she died, I started writing my book. And that was 4 years ago. And then the absolute worst thing in life could happen as I finished the book. And that was the sudden death of my husband, my beloved husband, who today would have been our 18th wedding anniversary. And that one really broke me. And I would say it's okay to be broken. There are moments in life that will break you, but you can't stay broken forever. And I took the time that I needed, and it was months. It was not an easy path to come back for, but I needed to feel all of the feelings and go through everything I was going through. But I had a choice to make, and my choice was I have to raise my 2 children. And I have to be the best mommy I can be without the absence of the best daddy there is. And, it's 2 years. It's just about 2 years. And that was a choice I made because I think I could have wallowed in that for a long time. And I still, it doesn't go away. Grief never goes away. You live with it. You live around it. But my choice was for my children. Because as I look at my life, I have more yesterdays behind me than I have tomorrows in front of me. But my children are little. They have their whole lives ahead. And it is my goal to make sure that they live the life that we had always dreamt for them, a life of happiness and joy and fulfillment. And they will always have a hole in their heart. But I can give them the tools and the guidance that they need to live the best lives they can despite the circumstances. But it's always a choice.
It's always a choice. Yes. And you, the way I've heard you on multiple occasions talk about the grief of your husband, and I've seen you write about him and continue to grieve that, it's such a reminder to all of us that grief just becomes a part of you. It's not that you get through it and it's over, but when it's a spouse, your life partner, when it's the father of your twin daughters, and the person that you went against your family's religion to choose, which I can only imagine how dramatic and difficult that moment was, that this was a choice that you made to love him and build a life with him. It's the absolute worst that he was taken too soon and that you're left with having to make the choice of every day walking through this. And I'm so glad that you've been able to write about it and speak about it, and that you have support of many of us who want to keep hearing your story and want to keep being here sitting with you, saying it's okay to not be okay. And not just because it's Mental Health Awareness Month, but because it is such a huge, monumental, unimaginable experience to lose your husband at such a young age. And I know that you have another book that's coming out that we'll talk about later, but it's so important, I think, for listeners to know that as you were in the process of writing this book, something happened with the last chapter. Do you want to share about that?
Yes. I'd finished the book. It was a work that had taken me from the death of my dearest friend to about, 2.5, 3 years. One evening, I promised my husband that he would get to read the book because I was really waiting for it to be perfect for him, because there were parts of the book that, of course, he knew, but then maybe there were insights that he didn't know. Because the thing is, when you write your life story, you are forced to confront and reconcile with truths that you may not have realized in the moment. So it was an incredibly reflective, insightful process for me too, and really uncovered how my life shaped the person I was. And I wouldn't be the person I was without the adversity I had earlier in life. So that too, I'm grateful for that experience, even though it was difficult while I lived through it. And the evening I was going to give him the manuscript to read was the evening that he had an accident and passed away. And so, I'd gone through my grief and the immediate shock, not the grief, but the immediate shock and the post-traumatic stress and all of that. And some months later, about 6 months later, I was able to pick myself up out of bed, and I finally determined to finish the book. Not just for my dear friend Lisa, but also for Doug, my husband, because I felt like I owed it to him to finish our story, because we'd started our story together and I needed to finish it. And in the process of finishing it, it's taken 4 years, but I was also left with quite the aha when one loses a spouse, because as I mentioned, I've gone through lots of loss, and I'm sure many people have gone through loss, but there really is nothing more damaging to the human psyche than the loss of a spouse, a loved spouse. And I realized just how much in Western culture and Western society, we do not confront grief. We are incredibly uncomfortable with the thought of grief and the thought of death. And that's why people put off their planning and don't have those end of life conversations with their loved ones, because it's so emotional. People just don't want to talk about it. And I realized that I could be of service to so many people if I just wrote a very straightforward handbook on what it is we go through as the grieving spouse and what is not helpful when we go through this. Because certainly throughout that time, so many people showed up in beautiful, loving, supportive ways, and other people disappointed. And I think that's true with every incidence of grief that people experience. But I realized that there was nothing written on a very practical, useful manner that didn't involve a lot of kind of blah, blah, blah by academicians or counselors or grief counselors or religious figures. It was all very overwritten, and there was a lot of spirituality in it. Whereas in that moment, it's just all right in front of you. It's all very practical. And there are just things people should say and things people should not say. There are truths that only we who've gone through it realize, and someone else who's not gone through it cannot realize. So I've started my second book, which is a handbook on grief. And it's really meant for everyone who's ever going to interact with someone who's lost their spouse, because spousal death is incredibly different than the loss of an elderly parent or a natural death due to age or illness or a different relationship. So that book will be coming out in the fall. And it's something that I'm really proud of because it doesn't currently exist. And it's really going to help, I hope, broker some thoughtful discussion and conversations among people who've really not confronted their own mortality. And as we all get older, it gets closer.
It does. Unfortunately, it does. You and I have talked about this previously too. There's differences in the West and the East, and all cultures handle death and dying very differently. But it is such a gift when people can understand. There's the logistical side. There's the emotional grieving side that takes, so much longer than people realize. And the more you can get logistics out of the way, it's such a gift to people. Like, actually, my mom and my brothers and I had a call yesterday. She's finished up her, going through her will with us, and what she's communicated with her doctor of what her wishes are. And it's very clear, what the process will be. And she's nowhere near that, but she's in her 70s. And so it's just, she has gone through it with her parents, with others. She's a nurse by background. And it's she can just be she wants to give us the gift of not having to worry about that part. So that when it comes, we can just grieve, and there'll be logistics to be done, but that she's done as much as she can to help prepare us. That's such an act of love. And sometimes you can't because it happens suddenly and you don't expect it and all of that kind of thing, or you're too young. But what a gift for those who can walk through and learn, hopefully from your book as it comes out in the fall, how to do that better. I'm really excited about that when it gets released, and we'll have you back on to talk about that. But I just want to say thank you so much for who you are as a person. You're just such an amazing human being. I'm so honored to know you and to hear your story and just to bear witness to what you've gone through and who you are and how you've come through it with such grace and wisdom and that fire that you still have. That's very inspiring. And so thank you for sharing your differences with us today here on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And I thank you for your friendship and your support. And I love serving on the board with you. I'm so glad we get to do that together.
Me too. Well, I'm going to have you hang out with our difference makers. We'll ask you one more question, but we'll say goodbye for now for the rest of the audience. Join us at Difference Makers if you want to hear the rest. Bye, everyone. Whoa. That was a masterclass in what it means to lead with your values, to know who you are, to build and cultivate a life that you want, where you can flourish and you can live out your desires and your dreams with the people that you love and do the work that you want to do. This woman, Samina, has really just given us a step-by-step path of what it means to not care so much about what people around you think about who you are, the decisions that you make that may or may not be the ones that they would make, but to trust your gut, to know that you deserve a life of love and flourishing, and to keep that as a true north for yourself. And that in that you will build a life like she has, one based on love, not fear, one based on love, not ego, where she has beautiful relationships and where things turned out in a way she didn't expect. But that love is still a foundation, both love for herself and love for those around her. Loving herself enough to know that she mattered enough to make choices for herself to build the life that meant she could flourish. And Samina didn't just stop drop wisdom today. She delivered this blueprint for anyone ready to own their voice and challenge the status quo. Her story is proof that you can be both powerful and compassionate, driven and generous, bold and deeply, deeply human. If you've been holding yourself back, questioning whether your dreams are too big or you're too much or your background is too complicated, let this be your reminder. You are not alone. And yes, you belong. Take that fire that Samina just lit you with, and she lit this into you for you to do something with it. That was her call. That was her call to action. Mentor someone, speak up in that meeting, invest in women, invest your money where your values are, pull your stock out of Tesla if it's in there, or maybe just finally believe that you've got what it takes to make a difference, because you do. And remember that the world needs you exactly the way that you are, being yourself, your full authentic self, bringing your values to the table. Until next time, keep showing up, keep standing tall, and keep making a world of difference. And buy her book and let me know what you think.
Before we go, I just want to take a moment to thank you. Yes, you. The fact that you're here, tuning in, leaning into these conversations, and doing the hard and beautiful work of making a difference in this world, it means everything to me. In this episode, if it spoke to you, if it brought you healing, hope, or even just a new perspective, I'd love for you to help us spread the word. Subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone you think might need to hear it. Your support helps this community grow and also helps us to keep having these important conversations. You are such a vital part of this journey. And every time you listen, every time you share, you remind me of why we do this, because you are out there making a difference in your own beautiful, messy, and imperfect way. And that matters more than you know. So thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up. And thank you for making the world a little brighter, a little kinder, and a little more whole. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep making a difference. You are loved. All right, listen up, because this can change your life. If you've been feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or just not yourself lately, I need you to hear this. You don't have to go through it alone. Life is hard. Career pivots, relationships, stress, big decisions. It's a lot. And let's be real. Sometimes your best friend or your journal just isn't enough. That's where Betterhelp comes in. Betterhelp is online therapy that actually works for your life. No awkward waiting rooms, no commute, just licensed professional support from the comfort of your own home on your schedule. Whether you need help processing a big change, setting boundaries, or just getting unstuck, you'll be matched with a therapist that fits your needs. Here's the best part. As a listener of A World of Difference, you get 10% off your first month. Just head over to www.betterhelp.com/difference. That's www.betterhelp.com/difference to get started today. Look, your mental health is everything. You deserve support. You deserve all the healing. You deserve to feel better. So don't wait. Go to www.betterhelp.com/difference and take that first step for your healing today.